Hello and welcome to The Love Vibe, a podcast hosted by Angela and Key. This podcast will explore and celebrate the stories and the storytellers that make us human and connect us. The stories of triumph over adversity and trauma. We will also explore our relationship to ourselves, to others, our environment, and we'll also look at astrology. We are two women from the African diaspora whose lives have taken us to Melbourne, Australia. We would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, and future. We welcome you to join us. Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome everybody back to The Love Vibe. We are so excited to have our second podcast, and we are so happy that you've come along on this journey with us. So, obviously, I'm Angela, and
I'm Key.
here is Key, and and today we're actually gonna talk about self-care. And I know it's like a buzzword, and I know it's something that we talk about a lot in our workspaces, amongst our friendship groups. But really, today we're gonna break it down a little bit. Yeah, like, what does it mean? And like, what does it mean to each person? You know, to take care of themselves, to love themselves. And there's like so many different facets to it, because people might go, oh, going to the gym is the way in which I take care of myself. But maybe there's actually other ways. And actually, today we're going to explore some of the things that we consider to be part of our self-care, part of what self-love means to us. We just want you to join in and to engage with this podcast. And so we're going to kick it off. One of the things that for me personally is like the root of words, like where do words come from? And I know that, self-care is like, oh, there's a self-care package, and it's sometimes connected to, oh, buy this product. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or have this spa day. But actually, if you really break it down, there might be other parts to self-love and to self-care that don't really require you to buy anything. And like we said, the Love Vibe is about the story and about our stories. And that's what we're going to do today. And as I was looking at, like, where does the word self-care and self-love come from? I know we kind of use it interchangeably, but in terms of like the root words and where they come from, I started to think, well, when was the first time that the word, self-care was even a thing? And I know that from what I've read and what I've investigated is that self-care actually was a term that was first used when mental health service users were leaving mental health institutions and going into the community. So probably around the 1950s. And the idea was that whilst the mental health service users were in these big institutions, staff, nurses, doctors did a lot of the day-to-day care living or the care requirements for that population. And obviously care in the community was about people who had been in these big institutions actually taking back some of their independence. So being able to administer their own medication, to be able to cook for themselves and do all those daily care living tasks. And so what was really interesting is that I never knew that that's where the term actually came from.
Yeah, neither did I. Like when you told me that, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. And that's interesting because I, as a social worker, I did 10 years in adult mental health. And I didn't even know that.
Wow.
I didn't even know that. Yeah.
Wow.
Had no clue. And so the term self-care was also something that, the Black Panther movement also talked about. But it was also in relation to healthcare.
Right.
That, the African American experience of healthcare during the 60s and 70s was actually not serving the Black community at all.
No, and it's still not to this day. But
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But that's interesting because I didn't know that as an American that's what the I mean, we know about the Black Panther movement, but I don't think we know about like the unless you studied it, you know what I mean? Unless you actually studied it, which is not something that I've done. So sorry, please continue.
Yeah. And so the Black Panther movement, obviously they were politically active, socially, like community, activism was really, really important. And their philosophy was that the healthcare system had so many inequalities in it that were impacting the Black community. So the idea about taking your own health into your own, do you know what I mean? To be able to take care of your own health was really, really important. But that was termed self-care. And you also see in the feminist movement the idea about, taking care of yourself, but also more recently in the LGBTQI community about, that foundation of self-care. There is something about some of these groups that I've just mentioned and trauma that, these communities were having to recognize inequality, but also traumatic experiences. And actually it was about activism. It was about personal activism. And it was about independence. So it's really interesting. So it's really interesting. I never knew this at all until trying to prepare for this podcast. And so, it does kind of put a little different spin on it, that sometimes when you don't remember or you don't know the root of where some of these words come from, it can take you off in another direction. Because, you'll see all these companies left, right and center, self-care, buy this self-care box, do this, do that. But actually, from what I've discovered, is that self-care is actually about activism, and it's political. There's a political element to it, in the root of the word. I also looked at the word self-love as well, because I know it's like the two words that we kind of use interchangeably. But actually they're not really the same thing. So no, not necessarily the same thing.
So what's self-love about?
So obviously self-care is originally, the root of it was about your health. It's health related. But self-love, the first instance of, or the first reference to self-love, was by a man called Rousseau in 1539.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
That's
a long time ago.
You think these words are new?
Sorry?
Yeah. You think these words are new? But they're not new.
No, not at all.
Not new at all. And I don't know. That was a surprise to me anyway.
Thank you.
And
that's really interesting, because I guess in hearing about it, it's like self-care is almost politically charged. And I think even now it still holds some of that in terms of like in the mother group, in the group for mothers, like mothers taking that sort of power back for themselves to, not be the end all and be all for everyone and everything except for themselves. So I can see that having that same sort of, energy within that particular group, as well as the LGBTQI plus, although that group. And in terms of self-love, it's interesting that that's been sort of in the lexicon since the 1500s, but has only just now kind of resurged as, this is something we should be doing too. But I do think it's a very different, when you think about it, and you actually think about the words and you know the history of self-care, then you start to realize like, yeah, there is a distinct difference between the two, and that, you know, self-love is more of a anyway, the way it's kind of perceived, I think, or can be perceived, is self-love is more of an inner working, if that makes sense. Like shifting those negative self beliefs, shifting self-limiting beliefs, shifting, you know, all of those sort of internal things, those feelings of lack or you know, not being worthy or imposter syndrome, like all of those things, shifting all of that and working on that and loving yourself for who you are. Whereas self-care, I think, at the moment anyway, and from a lot of people's perspectives, I think is more, you know, get your nails done, get your, you know, take a bubble bath, go get a mani pedi, go get a facial massage, or, you know, whatever. And I think that's just the surface level of what self-care actually is, from my perspective anyway. But we'll dig into that, I think, a little bit later in the episode. But yeah, very interesting.
I mean, yeah, and I think what was happening in 1539 that meant that Rousseau was talking about self-love? Because, you know, when I think about that far back, I think about, you know, the fable about Narcissus, and the idea of that it was a tale that was told about what it means to human beings to look at themselves for too long, you know. So I wonder whether Rousseau's reference to self-love in 1539 was a revolutionary act. I wonder. I really wonder whether it was a real departure from maybe common thought.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the idea of, you know, the community, the idea of the church back then, you know, would have been really strong, I would have thought. So the idea that, you know, that the love of self was something to be prized or even recognized, actually, I think it may have been a revolutionary act. So we've got that's from my sense of it. So you've got self-care, which is about activism. But you've also got self-love that was first referenced in a time when, you know, it could have been considered quite revolutionary to think of ourselves in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. I don't know the circumstances in which Rousseau came up with or coined the term self-love, but there must have been something really dramatic going on, I tell you, in his life. I don't know what was going on. But, you know, as human beings, we're the same. We haven't developed a new kind of, you know, emotion between then and now. You know, we still laugh, we still, you know, get sad, we still deal with things, we still, you know, worry about things, we still have joy. You know, we have essentially changed.
Interesting.
I mean, I was thinking about, like, what does self-care and self-love kind of mean to me? I've been really thinking about, and I kind of quickly had to toss out the mani pedi, get my nails done. I quickly had to discard that, and not because it's bad or anything, but there were actually more important things that
for you,
kind of for me, really.
Do you mind sharing what those were?
Yeah. And they're not as physical, and I call it the trifecta. To me, it's the trifecta of Angela's self-care, self-love package.
I love that. Package that up, start selling it.
Nobody should take this idea. You heard it here first. And one of them is about when I noticed that something's out of kilter with rest and play. I know that the self-care pendulum has swung in a very dangerous direction. And to me, and I think that's personal to me, because as I've kind of watched a generation of women before me who rest and play were not words that were ever really used.
Yeah.
And so I kind of watched a lot of Black women who just for survival were just not resting and certainly not
I
playing.
think they had their moments, but I don't think it was ever intentional. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I think do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like they made space for it. It just happened. It just, maybe they went out to dinner, or they went out, to a juke club or a dance club or whatever. But it wasn't, but it's very different, I think, now for us, because I think now we're being more intentional about it. It's like, no, on Mondays, I do this. For 30 minutes, I do that. Every day I meditate, that sort of thing. It's like, I think that's one of the huge differences between us and our previous generations.
And we're pretty lucky. We're pretty lucky, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a few years ago thinking to myself, how do I play? What? And I was like, I could not. I mean, I spent days trying to think, how do I play?
How do you play?
And well, I realized that I didn't play very much.
And I don't play well with others.
Yeah, no, I play really well with others.
I know. I'm kidding.
I know. But yeah, and I realized that there weren't many places in which I felt playful. And work kind of took over. It's this big kind of shady tree that just kind of took over my life. And because that's what I had seen, that work was.
I was just about to ask you that. Is that something that was learned that you?
Oh yeah, sure.
Carried on from? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to say I'm a recovering workaholic. and just work with everything, but in some ways you use it to fill a hole. You fill it, you fill work with the empty spaces, and I can say that now. And so for me, when as part of the trifecta, when play and rest are out of balance, and it will happen physically as well. I'll start to get migraines, my memory goes. And so for me, my self-care and my self-love is to remember play and to remember rest.
Right.
So that's one part of my trifecta.
Okay.
And the other one is about decisions.
Okay.
The decisions that I make. Because the decisions that I make about, for example, in relation to other people, when I'm in relationship with other people.
Okay.
Sometimes, I think I can make decisions that will, it tells me a lot about how I'm seeing myself in that moment. It's I've been a social worker for 25 years. It's really easy for me to give. It's easy for me to give. And so, and I might not always be aware that I might be out of balance in the giving. And so if I can track the decisions that I'm making about what I do in relationship to other people, it helps me to go, oh, actually, that's out of balance because I've taken myself out of the equation and I've focused on someone else's needs.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And so for me, once that's kind of slightly out of balance, and I have to be really conscious. It's not normal. It's not automatic for me to think in these ways. But I've just decided that it's quite disastrous for me sometimes for my self-care and my self-worth to be out of balance.
Yeah.
Because it tracks back again to that kind of strong Black woman and the female role models and the male role models that I've witnessed, where the bar was so low for the men. It was just like they don't have to do anything but open their eyes and maybe just say hello. You know, that the bar is so low. And I don't mean that just in intimate relationships. I mean that across the board.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah. And so for me, that's one thing, is about that out of balance giving. Um, and the other one is boundaries. Having been a social worker for so long and being quite intuitive, it's
You would have
really
had to have
easy to
learned
not.
how to put those up very quickly, I think, in your career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it took more time than you would have thought was required.
Well,
But
I mean,
it
because
actually took
you had
a
to be
lot of
aware,
time.
right? Like, and that's the first part. It's like being aware of these things and realizing and knowing that I can put up, like, a lot of people I think don't know that you can put up boundaries. Like,
Yeah.
that is a thing. Yes, you can do
Yeah.
it. And yes, it will protect you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's consequences to everything, aren't there?
Yes, there are. There
And
are.
you kind of have to gird yourself, particularly if it's boundaries with family and people that are really close to you. People who
Yes.
you just don't go, oh, I'm just not going to call them again. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
and so
well, if it's
okay,
required.
yeah, point taken.
From my
Point
perspective.
taken. Point taken. No, point taken. But it's taken me a long time to understand boundaries. And to me, how I describe boundaries is not like telling people about themselves. You know, I'm just going to tell you about yourself. No, it's actually about, for me, it's about the place where I can see you and see me at the same time. Because I think previously I might have been, you know, I can always see the person, but I never quite see myself.
Okay.
And so things can happen and I'm never in the picture because I'm just focused on other on them.
Yeah.
And so for me, the boundaries really are about, oh, well, how am I feeling in that moment? Or how does this person make me feel? Or how does making that decision make me feel? And what do I do with it? What do I do after that?
So it sounds like you're protecting your feelings, which is a huge thing for a lot of people to understand and like know how to do. And that is part of in terms of like astrology and spiritual stuff, that is an element of setting a boundary and like being able to understand how you're feeling in a moment and protecting that feeling, whether you want it or not. And if you don't want it, you move it out, you replace it with what you want, and you protect that. So you're doing great.
But I think, thank you. But I think like it's taken me so long to even think that these things were really important. It's taken me so long. And I'm not, even though I've been a social worker for so long and I'm quite intuitive, processing emotions, I mean, like, how do you do that? Like, well, like, there's so many parts of being a human being when there's no manual. Like, why?
Well,
why?
You know where your manual is. You know where your manual is. It's in the sky. It's in the sky.
Oh,
okay. Because you're a Gemini. You're a Gemini. That's why. That's exactly why. You intellectualize your feelings and your emotions. Like you probably like to talk about them and you probably like to talk through them as opposed to actually feeling them.
Yes.
I'm an Aquarius, right? I don't even fucking want to deal with them.
Oh,
like I think one of the sort of stereotypes about Aquarian, especially Aquarian men, but Aquarius, like sun, rising, and moon, is that we do not like emotions. And I actually had a friend a year or so ago tell me there was something that happened in a project we were working on together, and the third partner pulled out, and I was just like, oh, okay, all right, so we'll do this, da da da. And she was like, you don't deal with emotions, do you? And I was like, what do you mean I don't deal with emotions? It's what emotion is there? Like, he doesn't want to do it, so we just go around and do it. And then I had to, like, it wasn't until like 3 months late, like 3 months ago now, but I was like, oh.
That's what you meant.
I didn't even address how he felt. Like, I was just like, oh, you don't want to do it? Okay, all right.
See you later.
basically. So yes, it is an issue for air signs, I think, especially to really be in touch with their feelings and learn. Like it's you have to be intentional, and it's a lot of work for an air sign.
About it.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. And it's like, I mean, okay, so people feel emotions actually physically in their bodies, and it's like, I'm only just discovering that now, and I'm like, okay, cool, all right, okay, so that's why I've got this bellyache, that's why I have a headache, okay, so yeah, and for me, I just the landscape of emotions is just I'm just learning, let's just say.
Yeah, it's a lot. I feel you, definitely.
Yeah, but of course, in my self-care, of course, I love, going to spas sometimes. Do you know what I mean? I love all of that stuff. I learned a lot. Yeah, it's like, it's okay. And I remember as a social worker, I had rules. I realized that if I didn't follow these rules, it'd be bad. And they were, when I was really stressed out, junk food was not the place to go.
No.
And I was a runner. And it helped me to get centered. It helped me to ground myself.
Of course, Gemini. You just in your head all the time.
But I would figure things out. If I had a problem, I'd put my trainers on and I'd just hit the road. And by the time I got home, I would have a solution to that problem. And not because it was an effort or that I was trying. Things would just sink into place.
Yeah, it's natural for you.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, you know what? Kind of that's my trifecta for the moment. But obviously it goes through phases, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's Angela's trifecta self-care package.
I really like that. I think all of those things are very, important. And I think a lot of people, myself included, could take a few notes out of your book, around all of them. I was going to say especially, but it's like, no, all three of them are very important. Like the boundaries, the rest and play, and what was the other one? The decisions. Yeah, making the decisions and stuff. For myself, I'm still sort of in the process of figuring out the landscape for myself, essentially. But I am a Leo rising. And so the mani-pedis, the spa day, I love all that shit. Like, that is my, like, I like to look good. And for me, and I think I was telling you this the other day, like it gives me a lot of self-confidence, like to know that I'm in my heels, I'm coordinated, my makeup's done, my hair's on fleek, you know what I mean? Like it's those things, it's not on fleek today, but those things are very important to me. And it took me a while. It took me 5 years, because that's how old my oldest child is, to figure that out, to refigure that out, essentially. Because when I hit motherhood, all that shit went out the window. And I was vehemently, I'm a mom now. You know what I mean? Like it was like, it was pretty bad. And I found myself, only in athleisure wear, essentially.
Athleisure wear.
Like every day. Athleisure wear. Every day. That's all I wore. And so I was like, what is wrong with me? I can't go out with friends dressed like that. Like, and that's how I was going out, in sneakers and yoga pants and sweaters. And I was just like, this has got to stop. So it's been a real conscious effort for me to.
Do you think that was because becoming a parent was like a rites of passage? It's like a transition, isn't it?
It is. So if we think about it in terms of the stages of womanhood, right? Like you have the maiden, who's like the young, carefree, wild woman sort of, or is it the maiden? There's one
know.
that's like more wild and carefree. I can't remember which one that is. And there's a maiden, there's a mother, and then there's like the crone, which everyone
The
likes
crone
to.
doesn't sound very nice, does
Well,
it?
that's the thing. Everyone likes to think that, it's just like an old woman sort of thing. But this woman is wise.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? This woman is intuitive.
Okay.
This woman is matriarch energy,
Okay.
sort of. So
Okay.
it's just a terrible
Thanks
name.
for that.
It's
Yeah, it's like
name.
crone, drone, moan. It's like, okay.
Yeah. But we as women, we have these stages, and these stages aren't just in our sort of human life, it's in our cycles as well, right? Like when you go through your, because our cycles are 28 to 30 days. I don't know why, like, a lot of like I'll be honest. I have done a lot of looking into sort of the women's cycle. I didn't know it was 30 days. I thought it was just, those seven days, or 5 to 10 days essentially for women. I thought that's what the cycle was. I thought that's all that was. And then I started to do more research into it, and I was like, oh no, it's the whole goddamn month. Okay. Okay, so that's why I'm high and low, and I feel sexy, and then I feel like I look like a troll. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I get it now. And so even within that cycle, you go through those stages of sort of the archetypes of a woman. And so, of course, when you have a kid, I feel like you move into sort of, it's you're, graduating essentially from sort of the maiden into the mother. And it's not a lot of guidance on how to do that gracefully. You know what I mean? So
outside of athletic wear. What do you call it? Athleisure.
My Lululemon pants.
Well, at least you weren't expensive.
Well, not really. I only got one. So the rest are from, like, I don't know, reject shop, I guess. This shit is expensive. I got a baby to take care of now.
Yeah.
So that was part of my sort of self-care stuff. But self-care for me has also, now that I'm sort of more into my spirituality and, trying to better myself, I think it kind of blurs and crosses the line with self-love a lot.
Okay.
Because what that looks like for me is I carve out space for meditation. I carve out space to dedicate, the time that I need to my creativity is a big thing for me. And it took a while for me to really realize what creativity was. I think we had a quick chat about this before, where I was at a space in time where I thought creativity was just about arts, being able to draw, being able to paint, being able to sing or dance or whatever. And I was like, wow, I'm not really that creative. But something inside of me was always like, no, you're creative. You're very creative. You're probably one of the most creative people I know, talking to myself, right? And then I realized, like, oh, it's because my view of creativity is so limited. It's so geared on, the arts per se. And I'm a good writer. I can sing, I can dance a little bit, I can draw a little bit, I can color a little bit, but I didn't feel like I had a grasp on those things enough to call myself creative. And then I looked at, like, well, my husband was like, look what you do in the kitchen every night. And I was like, what? He was like, you just put shit together and it's just amazing. And I'm like, oh, I'm happy you like that. But, it's not going to be, everybody ain't going to be like, this is great. You know what I mean? But, and that's the thing. That's where my self-love comes in at, right? So now I have to focus on being kind to myself and loving myself. And when someone gives a compliment, actually receiving it, because it's okay. It's okay to receive, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of moving parts over here.
I hear you on that one. Definitely the compliments thing. It's it's taken me a long time. Obviously, we've been on this planet for a little long minute. Do you know what I mean? So it takes us a while as human beings to, like, join the dots and to, like, work things out. And definitely that compliments thing was just like, you're meant to be this, like, oh no, it's okay. Instead of going, yeah, you recognize that I'm awesome too. Thank you.
Right. Right. And it's still awkward. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to front. It's still, for me anyway, it's still a little bit like, thanks. You know what I mean? Like, but it's enough for me now to just be like, thank you. Not to follow it up with anything, not to preface it with anything, just to accept it and say thank you. And that's where you start. You know what I mean? That's where you start to learn how to take compliments. And then eventually you'll get to a space where it feels more natural. At least that's what I think in my mind. I'm not there yet, but when I get there, I'll let you know. How it goes.
Could you imagine when you get to a point where, you know, someone, you know, gives you a compliment and you just walk away going, yeah, you're just reflecting back to me how I feel about myself today.
Yeah.
Or you love the shoes because I love the shoes, and you're just reflecting back, you know, how, you know, like sometimes when you get a pair of shoes and you look down and you just go, you look so good and you make me so happy. Yep. And then when someone makes you a compliment, it's almost like you're reflecting back the joy that you feel about that thing. And you're like, yeah, I agree.
Right. Look at this shoe bringing us together.
Have you ever had a pair of shoes where you're just walking along the street and you look down and you're so happy because you're like, oh my God, this gives me so much joy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Cost $300, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, in self-love, I think in self-care and all that, it also looks like it's not always pretty. You know what I mean? Like, and in terms of what we were talking about before, about like feeling your emotions and feeling your feelings, especially for air signs, that's not always pretty. That's not all, you know what I mean? Like, that's not always, it's like an ugly cry with ice cream. That's also self-care, because, you know, you have to, I think, especially for air signs, we have to get in practice of actually feeling our feelings, because that allows us to, or that helps us stay grounded, because we can get up here and we're gone. You know, there have been times, and I don't know if you can say the same. I have a feeling you will, that you'll be in a conversation with someone and I am like engaged for a few minutes, and then suddenly it's just, I'm just off somewhere.
The lights have gone out.
Completely checked out. And then they draw you back with a question and you're like, yes. No. No. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't listening. I'm sorry. Can you repeat yourself, please?
The reason why I'm laughing so hard is because a few people have said that to me, like not being present.
Really presence.
Not being present. Yes. Where because my mind is just constantly 10 steps ahead of my physical self. And I've had people say to me, I can tell when you're just not present. Or I'm on the phone with someone and they'll say, you're just on your computer, aren't you? Mm-hmm, and I'll be like,
should I be honest, or should I lie?
and I didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
To be like totally present. It's not something that I have practiced or something that comes naturally to me. And people, well, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, people are living different lives. I tell you, man. Some people, when I talk, are totally present, and I'm like, I'm present for the first 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Be off somewhere else. I'll come back, but
yeah. I'll float back in to consciousness, but I'm gonna go hop over here for a minute. I saw there's a guy that I follow on Instagram who said something that I thought was really, it really hit me in the chest when I heard it. He was like, are you present or are you presenting presence? He's like, I'm gonna run that back. Are you present or are you presenting presence? And I said, God damn.
I rarely say these words, but guilty as charged.
Oh man. So, and you know, that's where the checking into the feelings and really feeling the feelings, and getting into your sort of womb space for women, especially, and men have wombs too. They just don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I
really
agree.
helps keep you grounded and helps keep you present
Yeah.
in your day-to-day life. And it's a practice, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
especially for air signs, it's it's definitely like you got to work at it, because yeah, like, and I told you recently, I was like, it's been so refreshing because there's not a lot of air signs in my life. Like
Okay.
my husband's a Virgo, that's earth. My daughter's an Aries, that's fire. Love her to death. I love all of them, but she's just got such a awesome personality. And air and fire, just yeah, we just play off of each other
Yeah.
so much. And my
Yeah.
son's a Capricorn, he's also earth, but he does have an Aquarius moon. So that's our tie. And it's funny because
Yeah.
my daughter's an Aries and my husband's a Virgo, but he's an Aries rising. So she's an Aries sun, he's
Oh.
an Aries rising. I'm an Aquarius sun, and my son's an Aquarius moon. So it's all like,
Yeah.
okay, I see why they
Yeah.
chose us. I see why.
I
I get
see
it,
why we
guys.
chose us.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was telling you the other day, like, I don't have a lot of air signs in my life. And so it's been refreshing to actually have someone that's as quick mentally as we are with each other. Cause we just kind of
Yeah.
we just fire off of
Yeah.
each other, and it's been great for me. I don't know how you
Yeah.
feel, but
No,
for me it's been
I feel
amazing.
the same. No, I feel the same. Yeah, I feel the same. And my mind just is 100 miles a minute. And you're just like, oh, you've got ideas too. And it's like, oh yeah, this is great.
Right? It's been really good.
Mm,
And then I'll bring up what we kind of talked about before, but like I had a meeting with my therapist.
yeah,
And in going back to like the history of words and sort of when they kind of come into the lexicon for people, she mentioned
yeah,
that she'd read a book called the History of English,
yeah.
meaning the language, obviously, that was written back in like 1912. And in it, the author talked about how words like inner child and
Mm,
consciousness weren't sort of in the lexicon, you know,
mm,
prior to that. And I thought that was so interesting because in talking and going back to our first episode where we talked about our beginnings and sort of where we
yeah.
come from, it's like,
Mm,
okay, so there are generations before us that weren't knowledgeable about self-care, self-love, inner child work, your consciousness, and how to navigate that and handle that essentially. And so it begs the question, from my perspective anyway, if there's any sort of issues that you're facing or things that you come up against or trauma that you come up against, I
mm,
wonder how much of that gets passed down from, you know, what's happened before you, where they
mm,
didn't have the knowledge, the skills, the language necessary to process those things. And
mm,
so, you know, the lines go down, and here comes you. And suddenly you're
mm.
in a time now, which is about awakening, which is about, you know, raising the collective consciousness higher. And suddenly
Yeah.
you're facing these issues and you're like, where the fuck is this coming from? Why do I, like, for example, I was driving the other day and a cop car
Yeah,
was behind me.
yeah.
I got so nervous. I was like, what the
Mm.
fuck? Why is he behind me? Are the lights gonna cut? You know, and I was like heart was racing, anxiety going through the roof. And then I literally was
Yeah.
just like, wait a minute. I'm not a criminal. There's
Mm,
no reason logically for me to be feeling this way. So where is it coming from?
yeah,
Because I don't think it's mine.
yeah,
I don't think it's from
yeah,
me. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I don't have that history.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I think there is something that I think that I recognise is about how more interdependent we are that on
mm-hmm,
each other,
mm-hmm,
and I know I've said this to you about as a social worker and feeling quite intuitive with people sometimes is I can be with someone and walk away with their mood
yeah.
or their kind of energy and yeah, and I think that we can be more sponges,
Mm-hmm.
um, and if that's the case for people that are in close proximity to us, maybe how much more so people who we share the same DNA with.
Same DNA, because you were in your mother's belly when she was in her mother's belly. So you were in your
Yeah,
grandmother's belly. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the
yeah,
eggs were all there. And
yeah,
they've done research in epigenetics where the influence of what's happening in the outer world while you're in the womb, or even like when your ancestors were in the womb, and how that flicks the switch on certain aspects of your genes and how they play out in the future.
For sure.
So
That's so true, because
yeah.
in working with kids, you had to understand what happens in utero.
Mm-hmm.
And most adults think that kids' memory only begins at like 3, 4, 5, but actually in utero, that babies are able to hear, feel,
Mm-hmm.
the vibration of what's happening around them.
Absolutely.
So, in domestic violence households where there is lots of stress around, that's not something that babies in utero don't experience. They
Right.
experience it, and
Right.
that's fairly well researched.
Yep.
So, that there is something about the blueprint. There is something about us being sponges, even in the belly.
Yep.
Yeah. So that totally rings true to me. That
Yeah.
totally rings true to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
I
a
used to work in a
go ahead.
yeah. No, go ahead. You go
I
ahead.
can't I've already lost it. Already lost the train of thought. Sorry, there's so much going on.
I know. I know. Honestly, my mind is just going a mile a minute.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of when I used to work with adoptive families. It was really interesting that some of those kids who had been, adopted from like really, really soon after being born,
Yeah.
that as they grew, some of them had gifts that their biological parent had. It was really strange.
Mm.
Like gifts for like music, gifts for certain creative things. Yeah, my kind of experiences as a social worker just really nailed home the fact that we are sponges and we
Yeah.
are interdependent.
Yeah.
So, the stuff that you talked about the things that we inherit,
Mm.
um, yeah, it rings true.
Definitely.
Definitely rings true to me. Yeah. So, yeah,
Mm.
self-care, self-love,
There's a
really
lot that goes
important.
into it.
Yeah, and it's so individual.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not a one size fits all, and it's not and for everyone, it's not a spa day. For some people,
No.
it is really about how they're thinking about themselves and that decisions that they're making about themselves and what it means about where their self-love or self-care is at.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm,
Definitely. It's definitely not something that has to be about capitalism, right? Like you don't have to buy stuff to practice self-care.
yeah,
Like self-care is you.
yeah,
And you in knowing that you have sort of, everything you need to look after you. So
mm,
I think if we just learn to
yeah,
tap into that, we'll be in a much better
mm,
space, you know?
mm.
Yeah.
And I know you said something earlier on about the lexicon and about
Mm,
the use of language to kind of describe self-love and self-care.
yeah.
But I do really wonder, like people that, our ancestors, like how, what did it look like for them?
Mm-hmm.
Because it can't just be, or maybe it can't just be that, we're the only people, we're the first generation or the second generation to be thinking about these things.
Yeah.
I do wonder what it looked like.
Well, I mean, if we
Maybe.
even just look at sort of one aspect of it, which and this is because it's so close to me right now, is motherhood, like being a mom. I think,
Yeah.
like our ancestors, there were far more people involved
Mm,
in raising kids.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that
mm.
was a type of self-care for the mom because she could get a nap in. You know what I mean? Like she could sleep, she could take a
Yeah.
bath or at least bathe herself, get herself clean. Whereas now, most of us are, there's some situations where mothers are, in that
Mm,
community, in that, kind of nest area where they've got their sisters and their aunts and their moms and their grandparents, all coming in to support. But for myself personally, I don't have a great big family to, like, first of all, I'm in Australia. My family's in America.
Yeah.
So they're not around, you know what I mean? And it's just not the same in terms of that support network. And I think that's why, I think that may have been what's contributed to mothers nowadays, especially leaning so heavily into the focused care, into focusing on self-care, because we've gone so long without sort of any sort of support. So now it's just like, push the kids off on dad, go get my nails done, go out with my girlfriends, you know what I mean? Whatever you can do, really.
I wonder about whether that also coincided, like those shifts and changes coincided with the concept of children and the idea of ownership. So you talked about a scenario where there was a much more collectivist idea about just in the way in which people were living. And so it was like, who owns the child? Who has responsibility for the child? And if you look now, it's the responsibility and the ownership, the idea that, as parents, you own children and they're your responsibility is maybe more of a newish idea. Because, you could think that maybe that, in more collectivist and much smaller communities, that children could be cared for by a whole range of people. And if you look at, Aboriginal ways about attachment, the idea about the attachment theory is a very Western way of looking at children's connections to their caregivers. And in lots of communities, particularly, Indigenous communities, where, your aunties can be your mothers. Do you know what I mean? Your community can be, you can have more than one caregiver, you can have more than one mother in that sense. And and so the idea about, attachment and like the child just attaches to one single caregiver adult, and that's a significant person, maybe back in different times that wasn't the case. And the idea is that maybe there was a more collectivist idea about the ownership of children, and that children belong to a community, which is what you're talking about.
Definitely.
So that shift, and the two, the nuclear family, all of that idea is like, they're relatively new things.
They're relatively things. And I don't think they're working out. Don't think it's working out the way whoever thought of making that shift, or and maybe it wasn't like a one person thing, or obviously it was probably like a gradual sort of cultural thing, but we know patriarchy plays a massive role in some of these shifts and changes, and there's also
so does our economic system.
Yes, absolutely, which is supported by white supremacy. So it's just it's all it's all sort of intertwined. And I think what we're finding now with the rate of mothers sort of, and especially now with the COVID situation, like the level of stress and just the lack of support is really weighing on, and I'm in a blessed position where, I'm currently not working a full-time job, so I can step in and look after my kids, full-time for the duration of the lockdown, what have you. But a lot of women aren't in that position. Some women are single mothers. How the fuck are they going to make this work? You know what I mean? So, and I just think, we're not, we're clearly seeing the effects of that shift, and it's not sort of working out the way I guess it was intended to work out, or what we thought it was going to work out like moms can do it by themselves, they'll be fine. No.
No. But it's really interesting. I've always thought why we equate parenting with women and motherhood.
Yeah.
It's and you know what, I understand it, but part of me is like, but why? Why? I mean, I get breastfeeding, I get, I get all
Carrying
of
the
that,
child, yeah.
but if you think about modern day and you just go, well, if it's just about going out to work, then, most parents, both of them are,
Yeah, it's
working.
two-income
If,
households. Yeah.
if it's a two-income household, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, why does parenting always equate to mothers and not
Yeah.
so much to fathers? It's really
Yeah.
an interesting one for me. Yeah, I've always
Yeah.
been really curious about that.
Maybe that's something we explore, because I'm sure
Mm,
it's got a lot of fascinating twists and turns in it.
yeah,
From because some cultures, excuse me, were matriarchal, where the mother was
mm,
or the maternal line was the end all be all sort of thing. But I think we're definitely wholeheartedly
yeah,
in a patriarchal system, and for some reason, like you said, like it's
yeah,
just mothers are considered the nurturers and the ones that provide the comfort and the support and the raising of the children, and the husbands go out and work, and that's a very entrenched. I found like
yeah,
there's some specifically Black men. That's it. Like I go out and
yeah,
work, you stay home and you look after the kids. And
yeah,
yeah, it's always sort of made me uncomfortable, which is why I gravitated toward a partner that is more hands-on in the raising of our children,
mm,
which I am very grateful for, because it's not something like I don't, because I'm an Aquarius, right? Like I'm just now learning how to deal with emotions. I'm not super nurturing. I'm not, it's just,
mm,
what are you crying for?
mm,
That used to be my response to my kids, which now when I say that out loud and I realize like how damaging that could have been for them, or that was for them, it's definitely, I'm
mm,
in a space now where I'm more conscious of how I respond to their feelings. Uh,
mm,
and the only way that I can do that, right, is to really focus on how I would want to have been parented in that situation. And so it's a
yeah.
process of reparenting myself. Sorry, I'm getting way off topic, but
No, it's really interesting, actually.
so it's a process of like reparenting myself before I even respond to them, right? So it's
Oh,
like
wow.
it's
Oh, God.
it's a whole, and so this is why I think
Wow.
going back to that support, and that
Mm,
it's the village that helps raise the child, is imperative, because there's a lot of work I feel like people need to do, and it's not just moms that need to do that. Fathers need to do that as well. Fathers need to reparent
mm,
themselves as well when they respond to their kids, because a lot of
mm,
dads can be, because of that patriarchal thing, and boys don't cry. You know how much that shit was like entrenched in men. So now we got this like toxic masculinity running around, but they don't know how to deal with emotions and stuff like that. So it's like they need to reparent themselves too, to get into
mm.
it's a lot.
I mean, and I think my takeaway from this little section of our conversation is that patriarchy as a system doesn't work for men or women.
No, right, exactly.
Maybe it actually doesn't work for either, you know.
No, it doesn't. I mean, here's the thing. I think personally, I think it needs to be a balance, right? Because I think what's happened
Mm,
is we put patriarchy up here, and we put, you know, the matriarch the down here, and we need to just balance them out a bit,
mm,
because we are both,
mm.
even in, within ourselves, we are both masculine and feminine. We are both yin
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yang. There's a duality to who we are, and if you're in too much
yeah.
into your masculine energy, that 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 fucks up your maternal, your
Mm,
feminine energy sort of thing. And
mm,
I learned a while ago that, yeah, I was like overcompensating in masculine energy,
mm,
just because
mm,
I didn't have a very good father figure in my life. And so in order
mm,
for me to navigate through the world, I had to be that figure, right? Like I had to
mm,
embody that masculinity to protect myself, or to feel like I was protecting myself.
Yeah.
And so that played into my inability to be nurturing to my kids as well. Like it was a lot that I had to like unpack to like really get to the root of who I am as a mother as well, which is like, holy shit, who am I as a mother? How do I want to parent these kids, you know?
It's really interesting as you're talking. My mind's just going, 10,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I wonder what types of conversations are happening in men's spaces about this type of thing. I mean, as women, we've always been given the permission to express ourselves and to talk and to explore our internal world. But I just wonder, what do these conversations look like? I mean, what does self-care and self-love mean in men's spaces? What are those stories? I'm really curious. And as a woman, I really don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm just really curious, about, parenting, in terms of fatherhood. And I wonder what types of conversations are being had in men's spaces about this. And I mean, not even to say, the LGBTQI plus community as well. You just wonder, what are these stories? What are these conversations?
I feel like when we start having guests on the show, we should have like a list of questions. Do you know what I mean? Like what's your take on this? And what's your take on that? And what's your take on this? And now let's talk about our topic.
Yeah.
Because it is fascinating to think about and consider, because it's like, if we're having these conversations, if we're talking about these things, what are these other groups doing? Like you just said, you know what I mean? Like what's happening over there? And I would hope that some sort of conversation is being had. Do you know what I mean? That's what I hope, despite what it is. I would love for it to be a positive conversation, of course, but it just some sort of conversation is happening is how you sort of progress and how you move forward in a lot of things. And I just hope it's happening.
Maybe we can kind of discover and figure out what these conversations and what these stories and narratives are, and they're going to be different for everybody. But I'm just curious, like as you were talking, I was like, I wonder, like in men's spaces, like what does this conversation look like?
What does it sound like?
What does it sound like? Interesting.
Very interesting. So we were talking about self-care.
We were talking about self-care.
We started on. And are we done? I
think we're done. I do. I think we're done.
Yeah. So you've got your trifecta, which is great. And I think a lot of people could probably get some insight onto how to navigate that outside of sort of the external sort of ways to do self-care, right? Like a lot of what you do is internal. What is play for you? Like, is this podcast play for you? Like what is play for you?
Yeah, it could be considered play.
Yeah.
This could be considered play. Yeah. And it's genuinely connecting with people and having lots of fun. I think that sense of humor, use of language, finding people on the same kind of wavelength as you, people who understand your humor and your perspective on life, I think is really important. And then bouncing away, and actually just being curious in my mind and feeling curious about the world. And sometimes I'll do like little voices, or I have friends who we just sometimes do little accents, or we just make ourselves laugh, or we just those are the kind of play. But I'm early on in the piece, man. I tell you, I'm early on in the piece. I've only just started even considering these things, to be honest. So I hope that there's more play and then different ways to come,
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So mine is a big part of mine is creativity. And I was talking about what that kind of looks like, and for me that looks like this: creating a podcast, doing the doing the visuals for it, doing the editing and creating the videos and stuff like all of like learning and doing all of that is very much in my creative wheelhouse. I like to actually create, and I think it goes along with my sort of desire to sort of help people. So it's like making sure that what I create adds value to someone's life. So that's an important piece for me of that self-care and self-love puzzle. And then also like, just the journaling, meditation, and doing things that this is it. Doing things that light up my heart, right? So if I'm doing something, and I've been paying more attention to this recently, if I'm doing something, whether it's writing, working, editing, whatever I'm doing, hanging out with the kids, if it's not lighting up my heart, I don't want to do it anymore. You know what I mean? Wow. Like I push it away, and that's not something that I want to do anymore, because I want to follow the joy, because that's how you get a joyful life, right? Like you follow the joy. And I know it's not simple. I know it's not easy. I know people are going to say, but I have to work. You do. But you find what lights up your heart, and you continue to do that other job that doesn't light up your heart, because that's how you pay your bills and shit, right? But you practice on finding the things that light up your heart, and then you start to gradually put more energy into them, or you even just allow them into your life, right? And then that's how you can start to shift and recreate your reality. Because it took a long time for me to realize that, like, you create your reality. You do it. You're a co-creator with the universe, but you do it. You know what I mean? The universe will let you know if you've gone too far. The universe will be like, nah, bitch, not that. You'll be like, okay, all right. Yeah, you know what I mean? Or it'll be like, and the universe never says no, right? It'll say, not this, not yet, not the right time. That's it. It's never like a, nah, you can't have that. It's like, not yet, or you can't have it like this, but here's the other carrot that I have for you. So it's taken me a while to realize that. And I'm just trying to spread that knowledge that I have, that, or my truth anyway. It's not necessarily what's true for everyone, because you might have a different take on it, and that's totally cool. If it works for you, it works for you. But this is what's working for me, and hopefully it works for somebody else too, because I've been low, I've been high, and now I'm realizing that, like, level that shit out, girl.
In the middle.
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
middle. I love that. I really, really like that. Yeah, the things that light up they give you that little jolt of joy. Yeah.